Hi, and thanks for joining. Today we're going to be presenting the Oncology Promotion Playbook, 4 strategies to increase success in 2023. We hope by the end of the presentation today that you get a better understanding about the changing dynamics for oncologists, with a specific focus on how pharma companies can be more effective in terms of their promotional activity in 2023 and beyond. The presentation, we're excited to say, has been featured in Fierce Pharma. Everything that we're going to present today is conducted by ZoomRx. ZoomRx is a consulting and market research shop that specializes in healthcare-related research. And for more than a decade at ZoomRx, we've been conducting research specifically around promotional effectiveness, both in-person and non-personal promotion, and even omni-channel. Although this crosses along different therapy lines, today we're going to be really focused on the oncologists. If I move on to the next slide, we're going to be talking a little bit in terms of today, my name's Dave Johnson. I'm a principal here at ZoomRx, and I'm working with Sarah Farina, who's a senior manager at ZoomRx, and we're going to be co-presenting today. So if I get into the meat of the presentation, everything we're going to talk about today is based off of some of the insights that we've gleaned from ZoomRx. And the data that's coming here today focuses on, to begin with, more than 80,000 interactions that we've been tracking between pharmaceutical companies and oncologists. As I say, this could be in-person, virtual rep details, or other omni-channel types of interactions. We've also been tracking social media, which is driven from 14,000 tweets from oncologists, as well as 380 conversations that we've recorded. These are HIPAA-compliant conversations between healthcare providers and patients. And I'll show you later, this covers a number of different therapeutic areas, but it shows some insights specific around oncologists. We also tracked 150 oncologists' digital behavior. These are oncologists who allow us to put a plug in and track their digital behavior across different healthcare-related websites. And once we collected all that information, we added into that 10 in-depth interviews with some of the oncologists who are in the trenches to better understand some of the specific insights that we were gleaning from the data. We found out through this information what makes oncologists tick, what they want to know, where they get the information, and what they specifically want from pharma. And we're going to get a little bit more specifically into that. So if I go into the next slide, some of the specific questions that we set out to answer today. First, as oncologists get busier and less available, how do effective companies optimize oncologist attention? And related to that, how do companies better partner with oncologists in this changing environment? How can marketers cut through the noise and reach oncologists with impactful omni-channel messages? And again, related to that, how do companies better understand and use digital influencers to enhance their messaging? So I'm going to begin with a section that we're going to call Oncologists Are Overwhelmed. And the theme of this section really is to talk about the state of oncologists today, which, beginning really with COVID, is a little bit different than it's been in the past, and some of the specific challenges that we know oncologists are facing. So if we take a look on the left-hand side of this chart, some of the a snapshot of changing healthcare provider demographics, we see in 2021, one full year into COVID, that we saw 117,000 doctors who left the workforce, while only 40,000 doctors joined it. In 2022, 1 in 5 doctors said that they plan to leave their practice within the next 3 years. And even though there's a lot of similarities with regards to the age of different specialists, on the right-hand side, if you take a look at oncologists, 45% of oncologists today are age 55 or above. And probably more importantly, 22% of the oncologists are nearing retirement age at 64 or older in 2022. We have a quote here from an academic oncologist that we interviewed that said, "People leave the healthcare field completely because of the perceived lack of appreciation and the risk involved." And this is a theme that we heard again and again throughout this research process. So what specifically are oncologists struggling with? Well, one of the biggest challenges that they have is staffing challenges. And we see this with some of the quotes that were provided from the oncologists. On the left-hand side here at the top, you see a quote where the doctor from an academic oncologist is telling us people are having to pull double shifts and then triple shifts to extend staff availability. And on the bottom of that same side, one of the biggest concerns of our practice is the staffing. nursing to pharmacists to front desk staff to medical coders. And we know that that's coming from a community oncologist, and we know that this is something that we're seeing across the board with oncologists. And somewhat related to that, this also ends up having an impact on patient care. Not only COVID itself, but the residual effects of COVID. We see one of the themes that we've heard a lot from oncologists is that they're seeing sicker patients than they have in the past. The top quote sort of leads to this: patients haven't returned to their regularly scheduled preventative maintenance yet. And then the middle quote says, we really noticed an increase in patients presenting with locally advanced or advanced disease. So if we go on to the next slide. One of the more interesting findings in the research that we saw is in terms of the patient-physician interaction. I mentioned before that we tracked more than 380 recorded interactions between healthcare providers and physicians across a number of different therapeutic areas. But on the very bottom, we can see here a trend that's very interesting in terms of the share of the time during the visit that the patient spent speaking versus the physician spent speaking. You can see here for oncologists that the patient share is the lowest of any of the different indications that we looked at, and in some cases by far less than half of what it was if it's a CNS-related disease. And although it's not the lowest, we also see the average length of the interactions are much lower than some of the other specialists in therapeutic areas. And what we see instead is that the limited appointment time really forces the oncologist to spend more time focused on testing results and treatment options as opposed to broader conversations. If you look at the bottom quote here, you can see, I know you've never heard of this specific mutation, but this means that you're going to get a certain treatment in addition to the chemotherapy, a community oncologist talking to an AML patient. Very similar types of themes that we saw elsewhere. So with all of this, where does this take from the oncology standpoint in terms of what they're really struggling with? And when we talk with oncologists, one of the things that we're heard more than anything is that treatment information overload is becoming their main challenges. They struggle to keep pace with the speed of pharmaceutical innovation. Some of the quotes that we got from the doctors are pretty interesting. On the upper left-hand side, there's so much new information coming out every day, and it's really becoming very hard to keep up. On the bottom left, staying current with treatment guidelines and FDA approvals or indications, that's all very challenging as well. And then maybe the main theme on the upper right-hand side of this, there are a lot of options for patients, but it also requires us as doctors to know a lot. That's part of the burnout. This is the information overload. So let's go on to the next slide. So when we talk about information overload, let's take a look at it from the different perspective. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we did as part of this research project is we were looking at 150 doctors who allowed us to go online and view what they are doing online with regard to healthcare related websites over the course of time. And one of the things that came back from that was very interesting was, on average, a typical oncologist in that group was exposed to 152 different digital ads each month through their personal device. Only 28% of those ads are healthcare related, and only 10% of the ads are relevant to oncology. And no more than 1% are for a single oncology brand. So this really points to that idea that pharma is fighting for oncologists' attention online as well as off, but the struggles in terms of all the noise and the different things that doctors are exposed to. And if I go to the next slide, it gets even more interesting at the product level. If you take a look here, we're taking a look over the course of a 12-month period, all the different branded digital ad exposures that those same doctors were exposed to. And you can see here only 2 rank up where they got 6% or more of the mentions, Yescarta and Keytruda. Otherwise, there's more than 100 different product advertisements and digital ads that they were exposed to during the course of their searching on different healthcare websites. So as we move forward, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah, and she's going to start talking a little bit more about this inundation with different exposures that doctors are getting.
Great, thanks, Dave. Yeah, as Dave mentioned, understanding that oncologists are overwhelmed, it really leads us to the question: how can pharma optimize engagement with these oncologists who are increasingly burdened by information both online and off? So since oncologists are bombarded with new information, the ones that we spoke to noted that they really lean on strong reps for product knowledge. They're especially looking to those who focus on the data and are able to anticipate questions. It's no surprise then that when we look at what makes an effective rep interaction for an oncologist, product knowledge really rises to the top. And that's captured here on the left-hand side, where we did a correlation analysis looking at about 14,000 rep and oncologist interactions in the last year. The importance of product knowledge comes up again when we look at the type of visual aids that are really driving oncologists' likelihood to increase prescribing. So when we took a look at rep oncologist promotional interactions last year, we saw that both academic and community oncologists found that visual aids related to product info as well as patient access drive positive prescribing impact. But this is especially true among community oncologists who are looking for more educational resources and dedicated outreach. One of the community oncologists that we spoke to even explicitly said there needs to be dedicated outreach to community practices in terms of education, especially considering that most cancer patients in the US are treated in a community setting. Oncologists also look to pharma to provide new information and data updates. Specifically, what we saw when we looked back at HCP and rep interactions from 2021 to 2022, creating a narrative that combines both clinical trial data with messages related to brand leadership or safety drive higher likelihood to increase prescribing among oncologists than those messages in isolation. At the same time, busy oncologists are really looking for clear, concise messaging and rep interactions. And while this might seem obvious, it's a recurring theme when we speak to oncologists and when we look at what's driving prescribing behavior in our data. And so that tells us that there's still room for improvement. Even when reps get everything right, even when they engage oncologists with clear, concise narratives that effectively convey key product information, they don't always close or ask oncologists to prescribe their product. Even though closing is linked to positive prescribing intent, as we can see on the left-hand side, the majority of calls rated as high quality by oncologists are not closed. And this is especially true when it comes to virtual details. As you can see on the right-hand side, only 35% of virtual details are closed, compared to 42% in person. This shortfall in closing virtual interactions is a potential weakness, as we'll see in the next section. So here we'll focus on where and how oncologists are seeking information in the digital age. First, we see that virtual rep interactions are here to stay. Looking at sales rep interactions between the start of the COVID pandemic in Q2 2020 and year-end 2022, we see that even though in-person interactions are on the rise, they've stabilized at around 50% in 2022. Based on rep interaction data that we collected last year, we see that academic oncologists in particular tend to favor virtual interactions. In fact, we see that 51% of rep interactions tend to be virtual versus 49% in person. The reason for this, when we spoke to academic oncologists, was mainly that they found virtual interactions more convenient, and then some of them also still have organizational restrictions for on-site visits in place. At the same time, we see that prescribing intent for virtual interactions is higher among both practice settings, which really underscores the necessity of developing tailored virtual interactions to best engage with oncologists. Looking at non-personal promotion channels, we see that those most associated with high likelihood to increase prescribing include news updates, medical journals, and professional websites. We also see that the oncologists who are engaging with these publications are also engaging with them on social. We see that ASCO, MD Anderson News, and OncoAlert are the top mentioned sources by our panel of social oncologists in the past 6 months. Rep emails also bubble to the top and are 3 times more likely to drive online browsing versus rep visits. What all of that tells us is that oncologist information sources are not only diverse and digital, but it's important for pharma to consider omni-channel impact when they're prioritizing paid and earned spend across these different channels. Understanding that digital dollars go further when pharma is able to meet oncologists where they are online, we wanted to provide the websites where oncologists spend nearly 70% of their time when they browse healthcare-related information. So as you can see from the list on the right-hand side, websites that enable oncologists to quickly find information often rise to the top. And when it comes to engaging with digital content online, the oncologists that we spoke to mentioned interacting with ads that shared new information. And we see that many effective brands are already sharing new information when it comes to their digital ads. On the left-hand side, we see that a number of top campaigns by the number of impressions generated by our panel of digital oncologists throughout the year all include new information or data updates. And this essentially tells us that prioritizing ad spend to highlight product updates on new data, focusing on some of the key websites that we mentioned earlier, could really be an effective strategy as pharma marketers consider impactful digital approaches. Next, our analysis found that oncologists are looking for social interactions, both online and off. For oncologists, peer communications is not only associated with higher likelihood to increase prescribing, as we see from the correlation analysis on the left-hand side, but it's also a common theme in our conversations with oncologists. As you'll see in that top right quote, learning from a KOL speaker, or on the bottom, peer engagement opportunities like ad boards, these are seen as ways to easily gain treatment information from unbiased sources. And because of this, it's no surprise that digital influencers are becoming more and more important sources of information for oncologists. And this really signals an opportunity for pharma to enhance their KOL strategies by partnering with digital influencers. The oncologists that we spoke to mentioned vetting oncologists for credibility, and this is a process that pharma can replicate as they seek to identify industry-friendly partners with high followership and resonance among their target customers. We've actually done that here at a very high level, looking at top influencers in terms of reach and engagement among our social panel of oncologists. The oncologists that we spoke to also mentioned that they often turn to Twitter for medical congress coverage. And digital influencers can be really important partners in helping pharma break through the noise generated by online congress conversation. For example, when we take a look back at ASCO 2022, we saw that online conversations spiked around data related to an immunotherapy outcome in colorectal cancer. And this was mainly driven by Eric Topol as well as the study's author. Beyond medical conference information, which accounts for about a quarter of oncologists' top engaged content on social, we also see that oncologists most engage with clinical information. So this includes scientific publication sharing, clinical trial updates, and treatment data. So that tells us that there's a clear opportunity for pharma to expand their peer engagement and KOL strategies through digital influencers and unique social engagements related to clinical information, for example, tutorials or AMAs. So to sum up the key takeaways for pharma, oncologists are overwhelmed. That means we need to make every minute count with short and impactful rep and NPP interactions. Oncologists need support that pharma can provide by offering key product information as well as patient resources. And as pharma looks for creative ways to engage oncologist customers, it's important to remember that their information sources are diverse and digital, meaning that pharma can really focus on tailoring virtual rep engagements, prioritizing key websites, and sharing fresh information in digital ads. Lastly, oncologists want social interactions with their peers and influencers in the space. That means that there's an opportunity for pharma to go beyond their traditional KOL strategies to facilitate peer engagements both online and off. So if you'd like to learn more about how we can make these recommendations come to life for your brand, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the email addresses here. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to hear from you.